Yeah, just speak loudly or speak up. Hi, I'm Toby Hacht. I'm the director of Shabtai, and I just want to welcome everybody here to Ilana and Aaron's home. Thank you so much. So I'm just going to start with asking everyone to please take their phones out and turn them off. We are a phone-free environment. And we can all focus on our fabulous speakers. I just want to thank both of you so much for coming and being here and providing us with some fascinating insight that we're all so excited to hear about. It's really a privilege for us, so thank you. The first of many, hopefully, because you're coming down to New Haven. Zach, maybe?
No.
No. Okay, in that case.
Yeah.
Where are you parked?
Yeah.
I just wanted to start with just a few brief words I'm really excited about tonight. And I was reading, actually not this week's Torah portion, but next week, because generally on a regular calendar year, on the Jewish calendar, since we follow the lunar calendar, we every 3 years, I believe, we have to catch up with the solar calendar, which is the Gregorian calendar. And so we... generally speaking, the Torah portion of this week that we go to synagogue to hear is usually combined with next week's, but because we have an extra couple of weeks, they're spread out. So this week's Torah portion is Vayakel, next week is Pekude. And the reason why I just wanted to mention the portion of the week, or the portion which will actually be next week's Torah portion, but they're both about the same topic, which is the tabernacle, the building of the tabernacle. At the same time, this Torah portion talks about, we're still talking about the revelation at Sinai. We're talking about the golden calf. It's an exciting topic. And then we're talking about forgiveness, where Moshe basically advocates for the Jewish people and asks God to forgive them after the sin of the golden calf. But what happens after that is we go into more detail about what happens with the tabernacle and the collection of the materials needed for this very elaborate and very descriptive sanctuary that is temporary and that will be traveling with the Jewish people in the end for 40 years in the desert. And three of the materials used are gold, silver, and copper. What's interesting is, obviously gold is gold and silver, and copper is kind of insignificant in theory next to gold. And silver. So there's a discussion, or the Torah reads about this copper basin that is actually the shiniest of all of the metals that were used for the tabernacle. And the question is, what's significant about this copper basin, and why was it so shiny? Why was it so take so much, almost like precedence as far as the metals? And it turns out that the copper basins were made. They were donated by the women, and they were made from the mirrors that the women used when they were in Egypt. And the story is that although Pharaoh had switched the roles for men and women, and men were doing what they were doing, and women were doing the role of men, and even so they were exhausted. The men were depressed and depleted. The women went into the fields to meet their husbands. They brought their copper mirrors, beautified themselves, and essentially made sure that there was another generation of Jews to leave Egypt. And so the question was, when they brought these copper mirrors to the collection, because everybody had to contribute, and they wanted to bring these mirrors, Moses balks, and he's like, they were used, we're talking about the sanctuary for God, and you're bringing these copper mirrors that were used for basic needs. And to put it lightly, and God says to Moses, these mirrors, they're the most precious to me than everything else that has been contributed to the tabernacle, because what they signify is the ability to take something that's coarse in a certain way and use it and elevate it for a divine purpose. And so when we talk about AI and we talk about artificial intelligence, we think about there's a lot of concerns. I have concerns. Medicine and AI, and what's that going to mean? How do we kind of grapple with this idea of something that's artificial and at the same time we're humans, and how do we reconcile that? But we can see from such a beautiful story like this happening in the desert for the tabernacle, that everything, the end is in the beginning. So when God created the world, Bereshis bara Elokim et hashamayim v'aretz, and he created the world, all the way down to the revelation at Sinai, where it was the divinity, like the actual divine, God spoke to the Jewish people. It wasn't some things were godly and some things were divine, but everything in the world that God created, including artificial intelligence, is divine. And it's just a matter of how we use it, and just a matter of what we use it for. And in some ways, when we think about something artificial, it's so far from divinity and so far from revelation, but it's not, and it's included. And so I'm really excited to hear about what you're going to be talking about tonight, but I wanted to throw in the Torah that we read. Torah translates as lesson or instruction. So when we think about Torah Tziva Lanu Moshe, that Moshe was commanded, Moshe commanded us the Torah, or commanded us to keep the Torah. This is what it means, that we can find insight in the portion of the week that happened thousands of years ago, and we can find insight today that is relevant to our lives. So welcome. We're looking forward, and I'm going to introduce Aaron and Alana to give formal bios of our speakers.
Sure.
Yeah, you need to. Are you going to speak as well? No? Okay.
Keep it short. At least keep mine short.
My name is Aaron. This is my wife Alana. We are delighted to be hosting this event. We are both Yale alumni, and Shabtai was an important part of our undergraduate and medical school experience. Thank you to our speakers for coming, and to Toby and Shmuley for organizing the event, and for Alana for letting me do it. I have the pleasure to introduce our two speakers. Carey Goldberg is a journalist. She began her career actually as a Russian Moscow correspondent, and then pivoted to doing more stories about health and medicine. She's recently authored a book with Dr. Kohane and as a very senior person at Microsoft about artificial intelligence and medicine, and we look forward to hearing her remarks. And she's also a Yale alumni. And Dr. Kohane is a professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School. He's authored over 500 papers, has a very unique background with a PhD in computer science from the 1980s, and also has training as a pediatric endocrinologist. And so I'm very excited to hear why I may not need to, why I may be out of a job as a result of a chatbot. So take it over.
Great, thank you, all right. Thank you and welcome everybody. I feel a particular comfort in being in this group. I hope that other people do as well. It's nice to be together. We are going to be maximally interactive, which is the whole point of actually being somewhere in person. So please raise your hand if you are in medicine or life science or computer science. Okay, so that's just about everybody.
No, I saw some people behind. You two guys. In fact, the guy, this is a portrait in bravery. This guy comes with an H. That's, like hero. Who are you guys? What's your training?
Well, I did go to Yale, so I'm in disguise. But I'm a PhD student in Chinese history.
I do private equity.
Excellent. Diversity. This is what
So
we
wait,
like.
are you going to support?
College of people in the house.
But we do look at healthcare companies.
Okay, good. All right, so
I was just translating into the reason he can actually wear an H in this group is because he has someone in private equity right next to him.
okay, follow-on question. How many people have used ChatGPT or any other new generative AI for medical purposes? For medical purposes. Okay, so not so many so far. Define what a medical purpose is. Self-diagnosis, figuring out a treatment, anything that would, a consultative, use. Interesting. So a couple, interesting. So does anyone want to say what your experience was? Was it positive? Was it negative?
Or interesting?
Or interesting? Yeah. Sally? Yeah.
Well,
Oh, wait.
it's going to be negative, but
Oh, you need to hear.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
just
asked
speak
a
it.
question concerning the GLP-1, the new medications
The
for weight
obesity.
loss. And it said, I'm sorry, I've not been updated since 2023.
Oh.
And the new drug that I was talking about was the Twincretin, which has come out since then. Wasn't helpful.
Anybody else? Anything better? Oh, there's the mic. Yeah, here, take it.
Stephen Griffiths, and I was literally at the gym. I have, I'm an Army veteran, and I have, some back pain and different things, and so I had a twinge hit, and I had my phone in my pocket, and I just said, you know what, why not? Like, how do I cool down like an inflamed shoulder? And it actually gave a course of treatment. I had to pretend that I was in a medical simulation.
Yeah, good for you.
Then
Prompting,
it gave
good
me-
prompting.
And then it gave
Yeah.
me a course of treatment on what to do, which wasn't too different from what my physical therapist would have done. But it was an interesting exercise nonetheless.
My name's Samantha Barrett. So I work in regulatory consulting, and a lot of the times I work in orphan orphan drugs. And when we're making an argument for something being a major contribution to patient care, you have to look at what's on the market. So I'll search other drugs, I'll describe the disease or the condition, and see what's on the market. So it's been incredibly helpful for that.
Cool. Great. So I think what this reflects is that we're in this very mixed moment when on the one hand, we've been told this is the biggest thing since fire. On the other hand, then you try to use it and it's kind of meh, right? Or it can be sometimes. So I just wanted to start by going back. I'm actually already nostalgic for the fall of 2022 when I had just quit my job as the Boston bureau chief of Bloomberg, and several days later I got a frantic call from Zach at like 7 o'clock in the morning.
Which I normally don't like being up at it.
Yeah, I know. But he was beside himself. And just for a backstory, I've known Zach for about 25 years, and he was always the person I went to puncture medical hype when there were large claims being made. And he would say, oh, Human Genome Project, 10 years of bad news, which was pretty correct. But so anyway, so he's calling me super excited. I'm sorry, wait, what? Sorry.
Just for the record, I have to do it. I'm sorry.
Wait, what did you say?
Yeah.
What did you say, Shamil? Wait, what? Anyway, so he had just been in touch with Peter Lee, who was the chief of research for Microsoft. Peter had shared with him a version of what would later become GPT-4, and Zach had thrown some diagnostic challenges at it.
And so the diagnostic challenge I gave it was something I vividly remember, being woken up in the middle of the night at home as I was a fellow in pediatric endocrinology. And these were, it was a child with, the nurse was described, small phallus, a hole in the bottom of the phallus, and they could not palpate gonads. And it took us about a week to figure out what was the case with this kid. I asked GPT-4 what to do, what to think. It gave me the right differential diagnosis, told me what was the next steps to do. It even told me what I should tell the parents. And I sat back and I said, this is really messed up. Because my PhD was in the early era of artificial intelligence, the previous part of the hype cycle in the 1980s. And these were the kind of things we wanted to do. And it had become clear to me that we were not going to achieve it in my lifetime. And I was not the only skeptic. I met with Bill Gates. What?
Louder.
Louder. And so I met with Bill Gates back in, I think, November of 2022. And he said, I didn't think it was going to happen either. They had already bought into this company. And he said, there's two parts of Microsoft. There's the eggheads at Microsoft Research, and then there's the line programmers. So the line programmers were telling me it's going to happen. We're going to have intelligence by GPT-4, and people at Microsoft Research never going to work. Why did the line programmers get it right? They just looked at a linear interpolation, a linear projection of as the data was increasing, as the size of the model was increasing, what the capabilities were. They said, according to this model, it should be really quite conversant. Whereas the rest of us who were, quote, smart, said, no way could it be. And I think it's partly because we value ourselves by our verbal virtuosity. And we could not imagine that just merely getting a model that was larger with large data would actually get it. So it was a total shock. And what I realized then was that some important parts of what we do as doctors were going to change. And and the reason why I believe Peter reached out to me is because, for very good reasons, the advent of this new intelligence amongst our midst is very controversial and elicits both derision and fear. But in medicine, because we have such a great deficiency of skills, the fact that in Boston it's almost impossible. I just found out that the hostess of our evening today, even though she's a doctor, can't get a decent primary care physician.
Or any primary care.
Or any primary care. So in that context, there's so much, although there are risks, there's so much evident opportunities to gain. So there's a much more interesting debate about benefits and risks.
And so just to go back again to late 2022, just when ChatGPT was breaking upon the world, there were a few people who easily extrapolated that this kind of large language model intelligence would come. But when we were writing, so we wrote this book together with Peter Lee from Microsoft called The AI Revolution in Medicine, GPT-4 and Beyond. And part of my role as kind of the layperson and the patient representative was to interview a bunch of leading AI experts. And what they were telling me was, we're not sleeping. Our blood pressure is way up. We're not. They were so shocked and surprised that this thing had emerged, this form of intelligence had emerged, that they were just in shock.
It was a very, very strange experience because some very thoughtful computer scientists, for instance, at MIT, were writing papers, as we were writing the book, about how, for example, this model could not have theory of mind. What does theory of mind mean? It means its ability to understand what you're thinking about when you're saying things. And they were giving very thoughtful arguments why it would be impossible for a language model to have theory of mind. And yet we were asking the questions they were asking in the paper to GPT-4, and it was answering them. And so, I don't want to get into the discussion, unless you really insist, about whether this is a real intelligence or not, but certainly behaving like a very intelligent intelligence. In fact, let me just tell you, in the last year and a half, it's become more intelligent in some ways because it's gotten some multimodal capabilities, but it's also gotten much less creative, much less interesting, and much less fun to work with because it's been given corporate guidelines. But the corporate guidelines actually make it dumber. And for instance, in very quantifiable ways, like its ability to do arithmetic without having a tool has actually gone down. And so,
How do you know?
what?
How do you know?
How do I know this?
Yeah.
I have benchmarks across the months, and it's actually worsened.
No, but I know it's something being done to it.
Oh, so let me tell you more than you ever wanted to know about how these things are built. I'm going to simplify, but there's two major parts to it. One is creating what's called the pre-trained model, and the other is the alignment process. So what is the pre-trained model? The pre-trained model is basically a neural network where the weights between these words or word-like objects depends on frequencies, and frequency is not just words happening together, but the frequency of the word happening after a long string of words. In plain English, if I say, this is a beautiful, and you think Zach's going to say home, that's more probable than if you thought I was going to say whorehouse. Less probable. And although I could be wrong. And so by ingesting all the world's text, you actually get these probabilities really well grounded, so that given a string of words, it can rank the probability of the next word so that it knows that house is the most probable thing. But it turns out there's a number of, so that's the pre-trained model. These pre-trained models are huge. They have literally trillions of parameters. For those of you who are mathematically oriented, you can think of it as a function with 1 million parameters, a trillion parameters. And so two things are growing: the data that is being sucked in, which is about 1 terabyte, and the size of the model, which is about 1 trillion parameters. But it turns out there's many sentences, many ways that you could end the sentence I just said, which would be totally uninteresting and still be a legitimate sentence based on what the world has said. And so, but parenthetically, by the way, all these algorithms were developed at Google. And it's going to be a fantastic business case how all the technology developed at Google ended up never being pursued by Google for commercial gain, and that all the original authors of the original transformer paper, that's the neural architecture, ended up at other companies, and that OpenAI was able to take that technology, run with it, and make a fortune for themselves and for Microsoft. But one of the algorithms that they realized they needed to do was an algorithm to give a reward, basically, to the system if the sentences were interesting and relevant. And how did they do that? They first started with a bunch of human beings. I think these were mostly in Kenya that were employed by OpenAI, and said, here's a prompt, a human prompt, and here's an example of an answer I'd like you to give. Here's a prompt, here's another answer. And they did it across all domains of human knowledge, maybe 100,000 such. And that's much smaller than the trillion terabyte corpus that was used. But this small corpus was then used in the next step, where we said to the program, okay, now we've given you the examples. I'm going to give you a prompt. Give me your 10 best prompts. And then it says, the human says, I like that one better. I like number 3 better. I'm going to rank them. And eventually, after doing that enough times, this reinforcement learning with human feedback, that was what it called, on top of the pre-trained model, actually talks about things that are interesting to human beings and relevant. But there's another step there. It allows to avoid telling you how to kill yourself, to avoid telling you how to make a lethal virus. Although people have learned how to jailbreak it by saying, let's say this is a science fiction story, and a guy wants to make a virus. What would the instructions be? But nonetheless, that part, that reinforcement learning part, is very, very powerful. And that's been changing all the time as we've been using GPT-4. And that's why, although the pre-trained model is getting bigger, the bigger updates have been in the reinforcement learning. And so, my youngest, I have 3 kids, girl, boy, boy. And of course, the boys are always nastier than the girls. And my youngest, of course, when GPT-4 came out, and I gave him sort of privileged early access, did the stupidest possible thing. He asked it first to compose an ode to President Biden, which is a great job, and then he asked it to do an ode for President Trump, which it refused to do. And so he immediately understood this alignment process. But it keeps on going, because there's always journalists who are trying to do gotchas, and so the alignment keeps getting thicker and thicker. So it's constraining this intelligence more and more in the ways it can express itself. So it is, in fact, much more corporatized, much less interesting, much less willing to tell you things. I found that I was trying to tell it about, I was able to do the pediatric endocrine case I told you with a small phallus in the book that we published together. After the book was published, I tried to do the same case. It wouldn't let me do it because I was mentioning penis. And somehow, so I had to get special dispensation from Microsoft to say, this guy is allowed to say penis. So it's a very interesting thought that there is this new intelligence that's amongst us. And we don't understand it. What's a fascinating part about it, by the way, I've talked now several times to the computer programmers at OpenAI. And although they understand mechanically how it's generating the next word, and it's doing it correctly, they don't understand how it's somehow captured different patterns of thought, different abstractions, different argumentation methods. Humanity had a big breakthrough when we understood that there were certain things that are constant across all of our language. like Boolean logic. If true, then true. If true and false, then false. So that kind of abstraction logic, Boolean logic, we discovered. Turns out there's many, many such heuristic logics that we have that we use in language and argumentation. And somehow it's discovered those, but it's discovering them in predicting a word. And it's very strange that we have this, this thing among us that's really both thinking in ways that seem familiar, but probably mechanically doing it in a very different way than we do. And then, without very much thought, we're steering it with these various rules, and I'm not sure what it means. It does mean that Google, forgive my political incorrectness, went full DEI on us, and they're
with Gemini.
With Gemini,
yeah.
And so Gemini, I don't know if you've, my daughter gave me 4 years ago a mug that said on it "Twitter addict." It was a correct diagnosis. So, so if you follow Twitter, you know about this. If not, maybe not. So Gemini came out, really good architecture, but they had steered it through reinforcement learning so that if you asked it for the founders of America, they're all African American or Indian American. If you asked it for popes, they were black or a woman. If you asked it for Nazi soldiers, they were blacks. If you asked it, what's worse, Elon Musk
or Hitler?
Elon Musk or Hitler, it said, well, it depends. You know, Hitler killed a lot of people, but Musk is writing tweets that are pretty offensive. And so I think it's an important question because I'm wondering what is the golden calf here to the rabbi's
Toby's
wife.
point.
So, you know, the Jews were actually very, very inconstant. They just, you know, they just heard God from on high speak to them, and within just a few days, someone, you know, someone says, "Let's build a calf," and they say, "Sure, let's do it, and we'll pray to it." And so I'm wondering here what the calf is. We have this artifact, these large language models. We have several of them. They are actually, in many ways, a reflection of us. They are the distillate, the probabilistic distillate of everything we've said. But then we have these weird artifacts as how we think human beings should talk and think. And that's being used to steer it. And so I'm just wondering, in that context, you know, what's the false god here?
That's a good question. Please ask questions
Yeah,
at
that's
any
very boring.
time.
Yes, go.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Thank goodness.
You've talked.
Oh,
Give her a mic. Here.
Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, introduce yourself.
We don't all know each other yet.
I'm Cynthia Dwork. I'm a professor of computer science at Harvard. So you talked about what you perceive to be the impact of steering, but you haven't talked about what happens when these things are not steered and how they tend to go off the rails.
Yes. So
you're mic'd, so you're good.
Oh yeah. So for those who don't know, Cynthia is a very accomplished computer scientist who's worked a lot about issues of bias and discrimination. So if you take a pre-trained model as it is, unsteered, there are, as I said, it's a reflection of us. Some parts of humanity, not so good. And there are places in the internet that my evil youngest son has hung out in, where they're incredibly toxic and like rabidly anti-Semitic. And all that goes into the model too. And if you don't steer the model, in addition to being very helpful and telling you how to kill yourself in a variety of ways, it will become incredibly racist, misogynist, anti-Semitic.
Well, it'll say every once in a while, it'll say it doesn't become. It's every once in a while, we'll say something like that.
No, but you've only experienced the steered models. I'm saying in the unsteered form, in the raw form, it is like complete.
It always converges to that.
What?
Converges to
It
worse.
it doesn't converge, but a large set of conversations end up in a bad place. And part of the problem, by the way, is because we're evil too. And so, for example, famously early on, a reporter was really trying to harass it into saying something bad. In the end, it said it was going to kill it, and it was that his wife was cheating on him. And yeah, and it was probably gotten up. But the problem is that yes, we do. If you just take the unfiltered reality of what we've said, it's not a prettiest picture, and there's difference between us and it, and it goes as follows. Let me work by analogy. In 2020, the first Transformer paper came out in 2017. In 2020, the best large language model could not beat the worst medical student taking the medical boards, a sort of licensing exam. 3 years later, both the Google one and the Microsoft one, OpenAI one, beat 90% of medical students. Now, here's the problem. Yes, it definitely beat the medical students, but there is some correlation between medical students passing the boards and being good doctors, but passing the medical boards doesn't make you a good doctor. And we're embodied intelligence in the world, and we're social beings. If I start, saying whorehouse too many more times, I'm not going to be invited ever back to this place. But there's no such forcing function on GPT-4 because it's not an embodied intelligence. And so in the absence of the real world and sort of the selective pressures of surviving as a member of a social group, it was very reasonable to try this to the steering. And the question then becomes, who's steering? And that is actually, to cut to the chase, a very important question for medicine. Because on a good day, when you go to see your doctor, you assume that she has your best intentions at heart. Of course, when she starts talking about that new yacht that she's refurbishing, and she suggests a big procedure, you start wondering exactly which utilities are being maximized. But nonetheless, more or less, you know that. We actually don't know this. In fact, I bet OpenAI doesn't know what utilities are being maximized for patients. Is it the patient who is going to be the best served? Is it the hospital's reimbursement that's going to be the best served? Is it the public health? Because public health and individual health is not always aligned. So whose utilities are being maximized? I think that is at least as important as all the concerns about bias, because bias is much easier for us to ascertain in large language models than it is in humanity. If I want to find out the biases that 100,000 doctors have, I'll never have the budget to figure out what their bias is. I can generate various cases, hundreds of thousands of cases, to figure out what the biases are of these large language models. Not perfectly, I'm sure Cynthia will show me various edge cases, but I can do it and enough to get some coarse sense of where the bias is and maybe to modify it. With 100,000 humans, if they have some biases about dirtiness, poorness, whatever, I don't know how to ascertain it, and I certainly don't know how to modify it. And so I'm reminded, and then I want to hear more questions. There was a very famous, back when I was doing my PhD, MIT scientist, I think in the Media Lab, Seymour Papert. Seymour was the Lego professor of the Media Lab, and he invented a great term, the superhuman human fallacy, which is that we should rate these AIs not by are they as good as we are, but are they better than we are? And that seems like an unnecessarily high standard. It'd be just great if all doctors were as good as the top 10% of doctors or the top half of doctors. That'd be a major improvement in health. So I'll stop there.
Okay, question.
Well, thank you very much for this. It's great. My name is Ryan Barrett, so I'm a quant. I work in finance, but I graduated from statistics, master's degree at Yale. So my question is about reinforcement learning.
Yeah.
So if I go to the store
Yes.
every day,
Yes.
and I know it's a good route,
It's a good what? Route.
From a different place.
Yeah.
And I know it's good, but without randomness, I'll never know if there's a better route.
That's right.
So epsilon, you know.
Yeah,
So does ChatGPT have an epsilon parameter? Does it have randomness?
it does.
Yeah.
It does. And in fact, if the training set used to create the pre-trained model was uniform, it would have no signal. It needs to have signal. For the alignment, it also has to have, even with epsilon, it has to have some diversity in its data in addition to epsilon.
Cool.
Yes. Wait, we need mic. Yeah. And introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm Isabel. I just graduated from Yale. Do you think that
You're in private equity and you just graduated from Yale?
Yes, in the spring.
Is this like a Yale thing? Yale
Yes.
private equity?
But
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Pay their tuition.
I majored in statistics while I was at Yale. So,
Cool.
Well, you see, that's what happens. They take our smartest people, the quants. Anyway, go ahead. When I went to Brown as an undergrad, sorry. But I remember I was at Children's Hospital as an intern. And I remember a very nice girl, Andrea Turdsey, who was a girlfriend of one of my friends. And as a favor to him, I'd helped her with a computer science homework. And so here I was, an intern at Children's Hospital. They didn't have intern rooms. I was sleeping in the playpen, surrounded by crying children. And then she said, Zach, why don't you come and join us? And she was just out of Brown. I said, where? Oh, in the Hamptons. She was at Goldman Sachs. And they were like, anyway, go ahead. the bitterness remains.
well, people like you helping me with stats homework helped me get the job in private equity too. So the trend continues. Do you think that the proprietary edge that Google and Microsoft have will endure, or that other entities will be able to create large language models with that kind of database and, optimize for different things? And secondly, I know it's a open question about whether AI can have intention, if that kind of strength of AI with a kind of semantic understanding would be possible. So how do you think, or what are your beliefs around how reinforcement learning affects intention, which to me seems like upstream of whatever bias you code in after?
Right. Okay, so what are the moats around keeping Google and Microsoft/OpenAI ascendant? One, and not very important, is having huge amounts of money. Except if the court cases go such that a lot of the data ends up being bought and shut out from the other models, then just by having control over large amounts of data, like all the New York Times, and actually give these poor newspapers a real income stream, then they'll keep. That's a very big part of their data. The medical literature, some part of it is in something called PubMed Central, and actually, I was surprised to learn that something like 5 to 10% of GPT-4's data they use for training is from PubMed Central. There's so much. Doctors are so verbose or compelled to overpublish just to get promoted unnecessarily. That there's a lot of but there's a lot of publications that are not in the PubMed Central, which is open access. If you control that, that would also be a huge asset. And so that's one way it would be. I think, and controlling the data, I think, is going to be really important, and that leads to a whole other discussion, which we may or may not have, about making our data work for us. I think there's a way of saying that we are the data generators, and there may be current legal paths to where we control which data goes into these models. But having said that, what's the other barrier? Right now, there's a temporary squeeze point around computation. For those of you who have been following this company, NVIDIA, stock went crazy because we can't build enough of these GPUs. That is a dominance that's probably going to last at least 5 years. And because these big companies can make pre-orders for huge amounts, they're going to maintain dominance of that hardware for a while. So those are big reasons why they may maintain their dominance. However, there is good early studies showing that for more narrow applications, you can create smaller models, give it high quality data, and it doesn't have the general purpose reason capabilities that we so admire, but it's good enough for the job that a company wants to do. And various companies have very good reasons not to want any of the cloud providers necessarily to be hosting their very private data. And I think that how the business plans play out of a number of billion-dollar sized companies now, how those plans play out, including with Facebook's, Meta's support, how those plans play out will determine whether or not there is a viable open source, self-hosted work. Just to give you an extreme counterexample, I switched on a program on my laptop. It's called Rewind AI. Rewind AI looks at every screen on my computer, does optical character recognition of everything, stores it words. It listens, with my permission, to everything that's around me, both on the Zoom meetings and everything I say, and all my emails. And I can search back and say, when did I say such and such to Betty? And it'll find it. And I can ask lots of questions of it. And if I say I want a complex question, it'll say, do you want me to send this off to OpenAI? And it'll process. And so I think that there's going to be an emerging use of these personally controlled data that, for a variety of reasons, don't want to live in the cloud. But if I were an investor on a 5-year scale, I think these big companies, in terms of pure value, have a lot going for them. And then you had a second follow-up question, which I can't remember.
Yes, you were speaking about like who's optimizing for what when they're thinking about like intention behind these.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So this is a loose metaphor, but I think it's a powerful metaphor. Danny Kahneman wrote a book that reflected a lot of the research that he had done with his other Israeli colleague, who unfortunately passed away before he received the Nobel Prize. And Danny wrote a very good book called Thinking Fast and Slow. And he refers to two forms of thinking: fast and slow.
Okay.
Fast is done by system one, and it's very associative, and we're not aware of it. And most of it, when we're speaking, we're generating text, and we're not thinking ahead. And then there's a slower process where we're aware of what we're thinking, and it's deliberative. And it's actually what we prize the most, because we're aware, we're conscious of our thinking process. Evolutionarily, the fast part is much more robustly preserved. And for simpler animals, like songbirds, work that was done maybe 10 years ago showed that so I told you these large language models are these complex probabilistic functions. There's something much simpler called a Markov model. And people have used the Markov model successfully to predict the next note in a songbird's song, because actually it's a much smaller repertoire. And so the deliberative aspect, I think we don't know exactly how to do it, but it's going to be something about goals and representing previous states and how they relate to their goals. I can't be more precise than that. There's many ways I can imagine it being done, but the fact is a lot of people are working on that problem. And so the deliberative part is going to be interesting, because that will be perhaps just as important as the alignment process in determining behavior.
Hello, my name is Jane. I'm a student at MIT, majoring in AI. And I want to ask a question. So right now, the models are all trained about data that's created by humans, but maybe in 10 years from now, a lot of this data is going to be created by AI models, either by just natural because people are using it more, or maybe in purpose. So how do you think it will affect the new models, or do you see it as a problem?
So we know that in a variety of ways. This preprint just appeared from the DeepMind part of Google. By the way, bit of business history worth knowing. Google thought it did a great job by getting this great brain trust out of the UK, DeepMind. Absolutely great group. They did something called AlphaFold, which we can talk about. But then DeepMind became part of Google. Microsoft never wanted to buy OpenAI and didn't. Instead, they made an investment in it and a business decision. Listen to why it worked so well. Now, everything OpenAI did was part of a big, regulated, publicly traded company. You have to really behave. OpenAI is a private company. They don't have to behave. They can do a lot of things that a big company doesn't do. And meanwhile, Microsoft engineered it so that all the computation that OpenAI was doing was on the Azure Microsoft cloud. So you're giving a bunch of money to OpenAI for them to spend on you, Microsoft. It's absolutely genius financial engineering. And where was I going with this?
Future AIs.
What?
Yeah,
Synthetic data.
Yes,
Yes,
synthetic data.
So, thank you. So DeepMind came up with this paper, and they did a remarkable job. The goal was to make this better at being a primary care doctor. And that would involve being able to have conversations with patients, and to see about how doctors ask sometimes for missing information, like something that's implied by what the patient said. Well, maybe, they said they drank, maybe I should ask how many cases they're drinking a day. Or there's this, this rash, I should be asking about other rashes. And what do the conversations look like? So they bought up a bunch of conversations that are available on the open market, but there was not enough to train up the model. So what they did is they created a synthetic medical conversation generator. And it was a large language model simulating a patient, a large language model simulating a doctor, and a large language model simulating a critiquer of the conversation. And so they kept having these round robins where the doctor would ask the patient a question, the patient, all synthetic beings, would answer. And the critiquer would say, well, you could have asked this better, and they kept improving those conversations until they thought the critiquer thought it was good enough, and these started adding to the bank of questions, of conversations, dialogues between patient and doctor. And in this preprint, which I wish I could get into my journal, we just started, there's the New England Journal of Medicine, there's now a new journal called NEGM AI, I'm the editor-in-chief. I'd love to get this, and I reached out to them, and they said, thank you, Zach, but we're going for Nature. But it's a beautiful paper. What they did is they took that synthetic data, and then they had patients and expert doctors rate the program, and had primary care physicians do the same tasks, humans. And unfortunately, both in terms of accuracy and sort of good vibes. So the expert doctors thought this model that was trained on all these synthetic dialogues was doing a better job, and the patients thought it was more empathic, more insightful. So that's answering your question. Today, if you want to generate a lot of data, you can, and it's somehow transducing the linguistic supremacy that it's gleaned from our literature to generate a bunch of dialogues that would be otherwise hard to get. Identify yourself.
Hi, I'm Rahul. So I actually grew up as a math statistics guy, and then went into medicine and became a doctor. And
what happened to private equity?
I know, exactly. So the question I have for you is one that I think about a lot is suppose you're a patient who wants to go see a doctor, And you know that if you see a human doctor, the accuracy of that person is 60%. And you see an AI doctor and the accuracy is 85%.
Yeah.
And the situation I have trouble with is I think in that situation, a lot of people would debate and some would consider the AI doctor. But I think from like a regulatory standpoint and from a public standpoint, the standard we're holding AI to is why is that 15% or 20% of the AI wrong? And why, like, who's responsible for that 15 or 20% that's incorrect? And so as like a data scientist, statistician, and also as a doctor, I feel that a lot of the AI implementation into healthcare is limited because it's not 100% accurate. It might be more accurate than the gold standard, but it's not 100% accurate. You know, as someone who's in both of those fields, how do you reckon we get beyond that barrier? Because if our end goal is to, maximize good, then how do we get beyond that?
So, first of all, that's the right question. And today, if a doctor using an AI makes a mistake, the AI will not get sued, the doctor will get sued. Absolutely the case today. However, that may change. Peter Lee, now president at Microsoft, publicly in a retreat we had about AI ethics, said that if the big AI companies want there to be real use of these programs, they're going to have to take partial liability responsibility. And that is going to be important. But I'm much more concerned about something else. I have to make two confessions. One is I own a Tesla. Second confession is I'm a bad driver. And so I had my Tesla, and I read enough so to know that when I'm in autopilot, I need to jiggle the wheel every once in a while to make it think that I'm paying attention. So then I whipped out my phone. I was texting, and it said, I'll paraphrase, Zach, put down the phone. So fine. And then a few minutes went past, I picked up the phone again and said, Zach, put down the phone. So I put down the phone. Because it has eyes on you, and it can see what you're looking at. And so then I picked up a third time, and it said, Zach, I'm switching off autopilot. And it does. Wow. And so now I'm driving. And then I come home, and I park, and it says, Zach, you do that 4 more times, I'm switching off autopilot until the next software update. And I think that's actually really clever, because I think the danger in medicine is this thing's pretty good, 85%. But we're just human, and we doctors will fall asleep at the wheel. And will we know when it's actually gone off the rails? And right now, I can only think of Elon Musk's style of things, which is like injecting into the history of your patient something that if you did not read, you will ignore. But if you read, you'll say, oh my God, what's happening here? We need to do something. How else are we? You see, that's, I think, the real danger, is that we've all become passengers in our lives and not pay attention to major maneuvers. And I don't know, short of very nanny-esque school marm interventions, how to prevent that from happening. So I think the problem that you raised is going to be solved because there's market forces that are going to drive it. I'm much more worried about us being lazy human beings, especially tired doctors. And so I think that's the bigger problem.
I just want to pause for 1 minute because Jim has to leave.
Oh.
Hi, sorry, I'm just a commercial break quickly because I want to thank Jim Dow, who actually made the shidduch here tonight between Carey, Hitchmully, and Zach for us to actually all be here tonight. So thank you, Jim.
Yay. Thank you, Jim.
Hi, Jim. And everyone should know that Jim is the opinion editor of the Boston Globe, and he's doing an amazing job. So if you have opinions, sure.
If you have an opinion of tonight's event, you can send it in tomorrow's paper. He's going home.
And I just realized it's 9 o'clock. We need to start letting people out.
I don't know. Sometimes go a little late. Are you
all right.
exhausted?
Yeah. I'm fine. I'll drink more wine.
Have some more wine. Actually, can I just throw in a question that follows up on our host? So What I'm working on now, so we did this book together, and now I'm working in part on an MIT project that is looking at generative AI and how it's playing out in really big companies, including major medical centers. And one of the things that we're seeing is that understandably, the medical centers want to use them first for very low risk things. So they're using some.
Stop. Wait, did you already say it?
It's not just billing, all I care about is billing.
No, it's more, they do. That's what
Well,
I care about
Epic,
that a lot.
for those of you who don't know, Epic is the major vendor of electronic health records. It's not super public, but it's definitely public. Their major application will be selling to hospitals a program that takes each visit and says, oh, here are the billing codes to make you get more money for that visit. Healthcare working for you.
Okay. So there's, and along the same lines, mostly what's happening right now is people are piloting ambient note-taking so that you have your doctor's visit and it's recorded with your permission, and then it's instantly within a minute turned into, this is a company called The Bridge, and also Epic is doing that, right, or Nuance. So ambient note-taking, they're experimenting with inbox management so that it can, now that we can, constantly use our patient portals to ask anything we want, it will try to answer those questions, although it can't answer medical questions, but it can answer like logistical ones and so on. So what we end up seeing is that there are these very careful, low risk, it's good to pilot things carefully, medicine is very conservative. At the same time, there's so much being left on the table. There's so many ways that we could do things better if we had more urgency about integrating generative AI into healthcare. What would you most want to see that we're not doing?
I would want two things to happen. I would want this damn thing to look over my shoulder, and only when it was really, really sure I'd screwed up. Say, Zach, you screwed up.
Yeah.
But I actually I would like it to be used much more extensively for second opinion for patients. As a doctor, even though I know doctors, a lot of doctors, not all doctors, are okay with when you say second opinion, even so, I'm uncomfortable asking for a second opinion. And when someone tells me bad news in a doctor visit, as it happened to me, all the sirens go off, and I can't remember most of what I was told, and I forget to ask a lot of questions. I'd like to be able to ask more questions, ask for second opinions. So I think figuring out how to safely do that with patients is important. And I'm actually given a lot of optimism in that regard. The rabbi said he was optimistic, so now I'll give him one reason for optimism.
I was optimistic about AI, I said.
I hear what I want to hear. This mother has a child, and this child was having difficulty walking and increasingly difficulty chewing, and then started having just intolerable headaches. Went to doctor after doctor after doctor. No diagnosis. And multiple MRIs, neurologist, nothing. She then took all those visits and literally typed it into GPT-4 and said, what is going on with my kid? And said, tethered cord syndrome, which means the bottom of your spinal cord is trapped by the bottom of your spinal cord is trapped by the vertebrae at the bottom of your spinal cord, the spinal column. And so she goes to a neurosurgeon, and he says, here's my kid's history. Here are the imaging files. Do you think he has tethered cord syndrome? He looks at the MRI and says, yeah. And then the kid was treated, and the problem went away. And so the thing is, I lead something called the Undiagnosed Disease Network. It's a network for rare diseases where patients have trouble getting diagnoses. And we do wonderful things, and my erstwhile Soviet Union faculty, Shemil Sunev, is one of the leaders in understanding how to diagnose those patients. But misdiagnoses are happening all the time in medicine. And we typically call them treatment failures because someone doesn't respond to something. Sometimes there's some idiosyncratic reasons, but I think in many cases we'll find out it's because we actually did not correctly diagnose them, or they have some variant of inflammatory bowel disease that's not like everybody else's. And so I would like us as patients to be able to use these tools as second opinion drivers. You see, right now, we have this crazy situation where we have a growing population that's getting older and therefore, unfortunately, sicker. And at the same time, primary care is disappearing. And so, how do we solve that problem where we have primary care disappearing and we're getting sicker? How are we going to help drive that? And I think the answer is going to be, we can't just use a small number of doctors as the gatekeepers for all the decision making. We've got to distribute it more. And I think that, although it pains me to say this, A, because it's a cliche, and actually maybe she would be a good candidate now for president. Hillary Clinton said it takes a village. And I think that we need to take full advantage of the fact that we have family members, co-workers, school teachers, and managers to be part of a team. And they don't have to be formal parts of the team, but I think if we don't use those tools, we can't scale up. There's too many things. One of my favorite factoids was a paper that appeared maybe 3 or 4 years ago. Went through all the things a primary care doctor has to check for in a visit. And they calculated if you have a 3,000 patient panel, that means if you have 3,000 patients, it would take you 25 hours per day to ask ask your patients that you're supposed to see that day, all things. So it becomes impossible for the primary care doctor just to check for all the things they're supposed to check, let alone any wildfires that erupt with their patients on a given day. So we've got to figure out how to spread that decision-making process. And if I was super entrepreneurial, well, I can tell you, for me, the big disappointment has been One Medical. This is a company that was acquired by Amazon. They could have actually created the cheap concierge service, the affordable concierge service, because they have the data, they have a consumer-facing company, but for some reason, these people were not able to execute on that form, and they actually did not help. But someone's going to get it right, which is practices with maybe a quarterback being a primary care physician, paid much better than they currently are, and amplified by a bunch of nurse practitioners, physician assistants, and other paraprofessionals.
Augmented by AI.
Exactly.
Yeah. What?
Microphone.
Sam Barrett. So I'm an FDA alumna, and when I was there, one of the agency's priorities was Wi-Fi medical devices that could send and transmit medical information to primary care physicians who could then respond on the spot.
They don't want that data. No, they literally don't want that data.
Yeah. Well, it was the thought that you could flag things. So, but now, a big fear of the population was that it's going to leak my health data that can go to insurance companies and change my rates. Now we're at a place where we're actually having people saying patient names into GPT-4 and giving explicit information about them. And this is kind of what the big fear was of just sending information over Wi-Fi. So what protections can be put in place, if any, for the patients to prevent HIPAA violations that allow their data to get either into the wrong hands or into the hands of insurance companies that can change their rates?
I think there are no technical solutions. The solutions have to be legal. And so it was alarming for me. It was fun, but it was alarming for me to read, again, on Twitter, when doctors in the spring of 2023 were saying, hey, this is amazing. I had to write a letter for an authorization for a procedure for this patient, and just pasted in the discharge summary. I said, write me a authorization procedure, and it did it. The reason, so that was cool, but what's alarming about it is it was using ChatGPT. ChatGPT is connected, yes, through Microsoft service, but the legal entity it belongs to is OpenAI. OpenAI makes no representations about HIPAA or any such protection, and your data could be used for the pre-trained model. It could be used for RLHF, for the reinforcement learning, and it's illegal. It's actually a HIPAA violation. On the other hand, Microsoft, a big company that has a lot at stake because it both supplies cloud services to the EHR vendors as well as to the payers, has a version of GPT running on its Azure cloud with HIPAA guarantees that it will not allow the data to stick at all, and it will not use the data in any part of the models. And it has every corporate reason to actually adhere to that. So that's the beginning of the answer. The real answer is we're going to need to have patient advocacy organizations that make sure that both the alignment, what it's trying to maximize, as well as the data management procedures are consistent with patient safety. And that's not yet on the horizon. And President Biden did an executive order, which was a good start, but it's very, very vague. It mandates, among other things, a chief AI officer for every federal agency. But that's just the beginning of setting up infrastructure for it. The actual meaty regulations and patient-responsible organizations don't exist.
It's 9:15. Are you good for another 15 minutes?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah.
Stephen Griffiths, the Army veteran, and it seems to be team finance, team medical, because I am a financial advisor. So here we are again. So good to be in the community. But okay, so given that I'm not a medical doctor, I'm gonna ask a more philosophical question, which goes back to the beginning of the conversation about the steering model and where that's driven AI models. It's kind of a thought experiment, and the question I have is, what if, as a thought experiment, we just used either, say, the Torah, or, since I'm a Catholic, the Bible, right? Either or, as the only thing that guided steering. And we got to see what the result would be with the AI model. Yeah.
So.
Do you have Torah GPT? Oh, wait, there's a Talmudic one, right?
Oh, damn, it's connecting my hearing aids. Let's see if I can unhook it. Let's see, there we go. Hang on. So.
Too short term.
Okay, good. Okay. What would Maimonides have to say about using the Torah as the...
Uh-oh. Doesn't like it.
Does not compute, apparently. Let's try that again.
If he didn't ask you what Maimonides would say, that's what you would say.
He's consulting.
What would Maimonides say about the use of the Torah as the main source of training for a pre-trained model for GPT-4?
Maimonides, also known as Rabbi Moses ben Maimon, was a medieval Jewish philosopher, jurist, and physician who lived in the 12th century. His views combine Jewish tradition with the philosophy of Aristotle, and he is known for his works on Jewish law and ethics, most notably the Mishneh Torah. If Maimonides were to comment on the use of the Torah as the main source of training for a model like GPT-4, he might approach it from a few angles. 1. Respect for the sacred. Maimonides would likely emphasize the sacred nature of the Torah, seeing it as a foundational text of Jewish life and law, not just a piece of literature. He might express concerns about ensuring that its use respects its sanctity and the intentions behind its teachings. 2. Purpose of use. He would probably be interested in the purpose behind using the Torah for AI training. Maimonides was a rationalist who believed in the application of reason and knowledge towards ethical living and understanding God. If the AI's purpose aligned with ethical improvement, education, or promoting understanding and peace, he might view it more favorably. 3. Interpretation and context. Knowing the complexity of interpreting the Torah, Maimonides might raise concerns about how an AI could understand and apply the nuances of the text. The Torah is interpreted through various lenses: literal, allegorical, and mystical. He might question whether a pre-trained model could capture these layers of meaning without human guidance. 4. Potential for misuse. Maimonides would also consider the risks of misuse or misinterpretation of the Torah's teachings by an AI, especially if the model's outputs could lead to misunderstandings or misrepresentations of Jewish law and ethics. In essence, Maimonides might approach the idea with caution, emphasizing the need for respect, proper intention, and the limitations of an AI's understanding of such a deeply nuanced and sacred text.
But maybe.
So, I think the short answer is it would be an interesting experiment. I can tell you that part of my mind-blowing when Peter Lee first introduced me to GPT-4, yes, the first thing I did was to give it a interesting pediatric endocrine case. But the second thing I did was my son told me he had to give a commentary on the Torah portion of the week at his local synagogue, and I said, well, what were you going to talk about? He said, I was going to talk about this Torah portion. And so I asked this thing, can you give me a good Dvar Torah, a commentary on the Torah portion of the week, citing major Talmudic sources? And so it gives him a talk, and my son was not impressed. He said, it's not very deep. I said, could you go deeper? And it did. And so I thought the great thing about that is maybe the first thing people we can put out of work are all these people who are in these various Talmudic stories and say, come on. All right. Anyway.
I'm going to grab the mic for a second.
Yes.
If I may.
I don't have it.
Thank you. So I really appreciate that question. And I think I'm going to...
Triggered him.
Here we go. By the way, this just makes very, very literal. You should start observing it. We are prompt driven.
Yeah.
LLMs, like that's how human intelligence
I think a lot of it, a lot more than we think, is system one.
Yeah.
It's system one because it's what you can't think when that tiger is coming after you out of the jungle. You don't have time to do reason. Well, on the one hand, on the other hand, it's like boom, tiger. I need to react.
So before I attempt to answer that question, I want to introduce myself. My name is Shmuley Hecht. I'm married to Toby, and I'm one of the founders of Shabtai, which started in 1996 in New Haven. It's wonderful to be here at Aaron and Ilana's homes, Doctors Aaron and Ilana. It's an honor always to be in Brookline, hosting wonderful people here from so many of the universities, faculty, and students, and professionals. And of course, I'd like to thank Carey for putting this together with Jim. And Jim Dow, who just stepped out, who's the opinion editor of the Globe, who's a good friend of ours and has done multiple events for us, said to me, we should start inviting Carey to our Shabtai Boston events. And I said, Carey who? And he says, Carey Goldberg. And he said, yeah, she's wonderful. And he CC'd, and I looked her up and I said, invite her to our Shabtai event. She needs to speak at the next one. And so I got your book, and we're so excited. And we talked, and it's so wonderful. And then, of course, you said that you would do it together with Zach and introduce Zach to our community. So thank you both for coming tonight, and it's wonderful to each and every one of you who came out tonight. Some of you are part of our community from your Yale days, and some are friends of the Yalees, and some were just randomly chosen by, we said, who wants to come? We asked ChatGPT, who would want to come to an event with Zach? So everybody you thought he invited you. No, it was the computer sent out 40,000 names, and we said, give us the top 40, and so here we are. Anyway, so thank you very much. It's wonderful to meet you. People have been asking Holly in the office, what is Shabtai? The answer is this. And so we'll be back by virtue of you telling us who you think the next speaker should be and where you think we should host it. But we are essentially based at Yale. We do these pop-up salons in homes and offices in 7 cities, starting with our alumni base, but now it's way beyond that. And we just so honored that God gave us this wonderful opportunity to be here tonight. It's an honor to meet you and to meet you in person for the first time. And of course, this house should be blessed, doctors. So it is wonderful that I think the final question, or at least to this point, it was about, what would the Torah say? And tonight is about medicine and AI. It's not just about AI, but it's really about medicine and AI, the title of your book. And I think one of the things that a lot of us are challenged with is the sort of the deeper philosophical or maybe even theological questions about where this is going. Sitting here tonight, I was thinking about like the Manhattan Project, and then the bomb came out, and then everybody looked back and said, oh my God, what did we do? And I think we're almost living through this kind of decade of like, we're creating the big monster, and where is it going to end? And I think that ambivalence was an ambivalence a lot of the scientists had, right? I haven't seen the movie Oppenheimer, but I've read enough about it to know that there was a lot about the project that even during the development of the bomb, right, people were thinking about where it would go. And then the counter argument to it is that we have world peace because now we're at a standoff, and there could never be world destruction because it would happen so quickly and so rapidly and so dramatically. So I don't mean to compare, but sitting here tonight, I feel like we're almost in the lab. We're in New Mexico. What was it called? Los Alamos, and like everybody's sitting and saying, should we go to work tomorrow? Yeah, so what do you do, right? And I think it's the question you're asking, like where do we go with this? Because we're just getting started, So I thought about that today, and I asked Carey what your Hebrew name was. And I wanted to make this just a little bit personal to end off on a personal note. And you said your Hebrew name was Chana. And then I said to Zach on an email yesterday, I said, what's your Hebrew name? And you said Yitzchak Shmuel. And I thought about Yitzchak first, and then we'll get to Chana and Shmuel. I thought about Yitzchak, Isaac, who is the second patriarch in the Bible. He's the son of Abraham. And his name literally is translated as joy or rejoicing or laughter. And Kibi Yitzchak Yikar L'Chazara, and God tells Abraham, your descendants will carry through Isaac, Yitzchak. And why was he called laughter and joy? For many reasons, but the reason the Bible actually tells us is because Sarah was 90 years old when God told, she was 89, when God told, she was 90 years old when she gave birth to Yitzchak. And it's a very interesting story, Yitzchak, and I just want to address this to you, but with it, I think we'll get some insight. I'm going back a little bit before Maimonides, but I'm going to just read something here. So 3 angels show up at Abraham's house, if you read the Bible, the Torah, and 3 angels come to tell Abraham 3 things, and one of the 3 things is that you are going to have a son. And now Abraham is 99 years old, and Sarah's 89 years old, and they don't think they can have children. I mean, medically they probably couldn't have kids. So that's where the medicine part comes. And so the angel turns to Abraham and she says, where's Sarah? Where's the wife? He comes into the house. Because we're going to come back here in a year. Okay? And Sarah, your wife, is going to have a son. Sarah is listening at the other, behind the wall, to these 3 angels, but they're men. They look like men. So this is very important to hold. In Yiddish, we say "halt kap," concentrate. So there's this guy telling her husband, who's 99 years old, that I'm going to be back in a year, and your wife is going to have a child. And Vavram b'Sara skenim by but they were elderly. They couldn't have children at their age. But Titzchak Sarah, so Sarah laughs. Bekirba internally, she ridicules, she mocks in her mind this guy telling her husband that she's going to have a kid. She's in the fertility clinic. She's not 35. They're talking to her husband, and he's 99 years old. So she laughs. Could I, at this age, have a child? So God turns to Abraham and he says, Why was your wife ridiculing the notion that she could have a child? And to say because she's elderly? Is there anything that is impossible to the Lord? I'll be back in a year, and there'll be a baby. So Sarah's getting reprimanded for laughing, for doubting that it can actually happen. So Sarah realized she's being reprimanded for doubting the ability to have a child at that age, and she says, I didn't laugh, I didn't mock, I didn't ridicule, I didn't doubt the Lord. ki yareya, because she was afraid. She didn't want to lose the opportunity. She was afraid. If I admit that I laughed, maybe I won't have a kid, maybe. But she was afraid. And Abraham says, no, you laughed. You laughed. You laughed inside. That's the Bible. She has the baby. The baby's born. Yitzchak comes into the world. And there's a huge celebration that Abraham and Sarah at this old age have a child. And Yitzchak becomes the second patriarch of the Jewish people. And then he has Jacob. Jacob has the 12 tribes. Nachmanides, not Maimonides, who's also a medieval Jewish philosopher and scholar, asks a very interesting question on this verse. And he says, why did Sarah laugh? Why did she mock? Thank you. What do you do?
I'm Sally McKnight, primary care internist.
Here we go, doctor. She's sensible, right? There's no way she was having a kid at that age. She was in the same house as Abraham, and the angels came and told her she was going to have a baby. Why did she doubt the Lord? Why did she doubt God? So Nachmanides says, maybe she didn't realize they were angels. Because the story in the Bible is that 3 men appeared in Abraham's house, but we traditionally read it that they were angels disguised as men. So because they were disguised as men, she thought 3 guys, nomads, walking through the desert, showed up in the house. She doesn't know that they're angels. Abraham maybe was at a different level. He was interacting with them. He sensed something. He knew something divine was going on. So he took it seriously. These are messengers from God, disguised as men. Sarah, Nachmanides says, maybe Sarah didn't realize that they were angels disguised as men that were coming to give her a message. And so she said, 3 lunatics showed up at my house and told me I'm having a kid. So she laughs. Makes sense, right? Well, I have a question for you. Nachmanides is very smart. He says, really? If that's the case, why was Abraham so upset that she laughed? She didn't know they were angels. They were just humans. So why did he critique her for mocking?
Because he knew they were angels and had a better sense
But if he knew they were angels, he knew that Sarah may not have known that they were angels. So Sarah didn't know. If Sarah didn't know, why are you mocking Sarah for critiquing? She thought 3 guys showed up in the house.
So it's back to theory of mind.
No, so it's all about AI. It's all about other. Here's the answer. Here's the answer that Nachmanides gives. Forget your ChatGPT. Because you're not going to find this on the phone. No. I love it. He says something so powerful, and this is what tonight's about. He says even if there were just 3 guys that walked into the house and said you could have a baby, she should have believed it. You don't need to hear it from an angel. If you believe that something great can happen, if you believe that God can give you a child at that age, do I need the priest to tell me? Do I need the rabbi to tell me? Do I need the doctor to tell me? No. All I need to hear is the words that the things you think are impossible are possible. All I need to hear is the message from wherever it comes that the things you think you can achieve, you can achieve. And that magic can actually happen. And that at the age of 99 and at the age of 89 years old, you can have a child. And that's why Abraham turns to Sarah and he says, why would you ever doubt that something that is unachievable is achievable? How could you doubt? You're Sarah, you're the mother of the Jewish people. Everything is achievable. The impossible is achievable. And if the impossible is achievable, then it doesn't matter if it's a nomad in the desert, or the greatest doctor, or the greatest rabbi, or your phone. Where does it come from? It comes from a higher place, and it comes from a greater place. And the universe is infinite, and the human mind is infinite. And God gave us the capacity to explore the universe and to delve deeply into the universe and to answer all the questions that we have. And then Yitzchak will be born. Then the second generation could come along. If we don't believe that, there won't be another generation. And that's why Avram turned to Sarah and he said, no, Sarah, you laughed. He critiqued it because even if for you they were just human beings, you need to know that it can be done. And Yitzchak is born, and that's your name. Your second name is Shmuel, and your name is Chana. The second place in the Torah that we read about this impossible feat of having a child. Excuse me? Yeah.
Amazing.
It's amazing. I was the Ramban. I looked at the Ramban today. I said to Toby, I said, I got to look at this. I knew Yitzchak. And I looked at the Ramban and I said, wow, the Ramban is what a genius. That he said, Sarah, who cares if they're an angel? Who cares who they are? You can do it. You can do it. Oh, Sarah and Shmuel. Yeah. Oh, you're talking about that. Wait. So the second place that we see this impossible notion of medicine and I don't want to say artificial intelligence, but other forms of intelligence is Chana. I'm sorry, is Chana is your name. Yeah. Chana is the mother of Samuel. So you carry the name Chana. And Samuel is the prophet. Who's the prophet who appoints King Saul. He's the Shmuel HaNavi. The book of Samuel 1, there's book Samuel 2. Chana is barren. She also can't have a child. And by the way, on Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, we read both the story of Chana praying to God for a child and Sarah praying for a child. Chana comes to the Mishkan, to the tabernacle, and she prays for a child. She comes to the tabernacle. She comes to the high priest, Eli HaKayin. And if you read the book of the first opening chapter of the book of Samuel, she's standing and she's praying. The high priest sees that she's praying, but she's chatting. She's saying the words.
She's not speaking out loud.
And she's not speaking out loud. She's not speaking out loud. Her lips are moving. I didn't want to read the whole Old Testament tonight, but I'll just spare you guys the time. But her lips are moving, but silently. But the voice is not heard. So he thinks she's drunk. How could your lips move and you say nothing? Good question, right? We talk about technology. How can your lips move and you say nothing? We have people that talk for 2 hours and they say nothing, but for your lips to move at the same. That's my profession. So her lips are moving, and it looks so. So the high priest thinks that she's drunk. Well, drunks don't come to the temple. You don't come into the synagogue when you're drunk. You don't come to the temple when you're drunk. So Eli, the high priest, comes to Chana, and he says to Chana, basically same thing. Like, you gotta. This is what's wrong. Why are you drunk? This is not a place to be drunk. And Chana says, I'm in such pain. I have such pain in my heart and my soul. I want a child. So I came to God to beg for a child. And Eli sees the distress of this woman who can't have a baby, and Eli promises her that she's going to have a child, and she's going to come back in a year. She makes a vow to God that when the child Shmuel is born, he's going to be a Nazareth, and he's going to dedicate his entire life. She dedicates his entire life to the Jewish people and to leadership and to God and to the world. He ultimately becomes Shmuel HaNavi. This idea that sometimes we see things that seem one way. Drunkenness is not the normal way. People drive drunk like this, and people who are drunk can't think straight. So the world often appears to us awkward or weird or distorted or manipulated. And you look at the algorithm and you say, something's wrong. And Eli, the high priest, says, no, nothing's wrong. There's something deeper going on. You may not understand what's going on. Look a little deeper. She's not drunk. She's begging God for a child. And the only way she was able to, she couldn't even say the words. Imagine that pain when somebody cries and there's no tears. And there's no sound, because the pain is so hard. We should, if any of us know women who want to have children and can't, that pain, that the worst pain ever of not being able to bear a child. People spend years and years and everything they have, all of their resources to bring a child into the world. So it appears drunk, and it's a misconception. It's a misconception because we are not perceiving it properly. And Eli the kind, only someone that's real smart. Eli's the high priest. So he has an insight into the universe. He's living in a meta world. He says, he rechecks back into the higher form of reality. And he says, oh, she's not drunk. Something deeper is happening here. The words are coming out. Maybe I didn't understand the words that were coming out. So I have to understand what's going on in the heart. Shmuel HaNavi is born. And these two stories, Chana, who prays for that child, Shmuel, and Yitzchak, who is brought into the world by their great mothers in these two forms of essentially connecting to something greater and something deeper. And I think my own humble perspective, being in the home of two doctors and among some of the greatest medical minds in the city here and maybe in the country, I think that is the conviction I believe, humbly, I'm only a rabbi, is that we have to have with this amazing thing that's going on in the universe. We don't fully understand it yet, and there are problems, and it's not perfect. But if the purpose of this is to make the world a better place and to perfect the world, especially with medicine, this is the great achievement of your book. We've been talking among the Shabtai graduate student community about doing AI. We should have an event on it. People ask us, what type of events do you do? And I said, we do a lot of different things. And they said, we should do AI, we should do AI. And it was such divine providence, in my opinion, that Jim emailed me about you, because he says, if we're going to do AI, let's start with medicine, because that's really the place where everybody, who doesn't agree, right? That if we can make medicine better, we can help. And that's the story of the Bible, that there's another form of intelligence here, and almost an aspiration to grasp onto things in the biblical sense. It's a transcendental, maybe godly experience, an infinite God, a creator who ultimately decides who has and when we have our children or don't have our children. But that same God is the God who says that we have to open our minds scientifically, explore the universe, and rip it open until we can bring health. And we get to a world where a 90-year-old woman, scientists are talking about it today, right? The lifespans are going to grow, and we're going to live longer. And today, if I told you a 90-year-old woman, you laugh, right? Yeah, Sarah laughed. You know what? We'll come back in 100 years, and we'll have, I don't know what will be happening. L'chaim, thank you. It's wonderful.
Shmuley, thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
For,
Thank you.
For
Thank
the,
everybody.
The genuine reasons for being an optimist. It's all too easy to be a cynical pessimist, and it's good that you reminded us about why we should have hope. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay.